We're speaking to Dick Benson-Gyles at the launch of his new book, The Boy in the Mask. It's about a book about T.E. Lawrence and his life. Can you tell us a bit more about this enigma that you've chosen?
Well, he's probably one of the most chronicled British historical figures in the last 150 years, bar Churchill. There have been over 170 biographies on him. Been 3 in the last 4 years, before mine. He seems to occupy a special place in the British psyche. There's something about him that appeals to the British idea of themselves. The British, they think, that he had charisma, he was tough, he was mysterious, he was shy, but at the same time he could, command troops and could push himself. And there's a lot of self-denigration and sort of hiding and then reappearing. In fact, the American journalist Lowell Thomas, who made him famous really with his travelogue in 1919, said something about beautifully with an old Turkish proverb, which is, he spent his life backing into the limelight. Okay. Which is, you see. But the point is, you heard what I said at the during the yes. talking there. His father was an Anglo-Irish baronet who ran off with a governess yes. and abandoned a wife and 4 daughters and 9. It's like some ridiculous story. If you wrote it, people say, no, that won't happen. In Victorian times, you didn't run off with somebody else. You had a bit of fun with the maid, and then you sacked her, But he ran off with her and produced 5 sons, yes. one of whom was Lawrence of Arabia. And they changed their name to Lawrence, and their whole lives, Lawrence's parents thought they were going to be exposed. And he was the only one to find out the truth. He overheard his father talking to a solicitor about the estates in Ireland, and worked it all out, and got the terrible shock of his life to realize that his frightfully religious and very pious mother and father were not Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence. One of them was Sir Thomas Chapman. The other one was an illegitimate housemaid from Sunderland in the north of England. Wow. And they weren't who they said they were, and it was all a hypocrisy. Yeah. And the reason was because the wife in Ireland, out of spite, of course, wouldn't give him a divorce. And so before the war, when his parents talked about Ireland, they went on holidays there sometimes, to do with the estates, but they pretended it was just to have a little holiday. But he knew what they were doing, and he didn't like it. He said, why do you go to Ireland? Nobody wants to go to Ireland. There's nothing interesting there. What are you doing it for? And yet, after the war, when he became famous in his own right, for some strange reason, he suddenly wanted to reclaim his roots, and he began to feel that he'd like to be a Chapman, because he couldn't say anything to anybody, because his mother was alive. His father died in 1919, but he couldn't, it would have embarrassed and exposed his mother. So he couldn't say, no, I'm not just T.E. Lawrence, I'm the son of Sir... He couldn't say it. So he was really kind of repressed and upset and frustrated about it. But he did want to come back here. He said innumerable times in the 1920s that he was Irish, felt Irish, wanted to be Irish. And he said he was going to come over here and buy some land at some point before he died. But there's no proof he came. But I in my book, there's a couple of examples that make it pretty clear he probably did.
Okay, so you're leading to that he possibly did come, even though...
He did. Yeah. I think he did, because there was a man called Major McVeigh who lived at a house called Drewstown House, quite near here. Okay. And his butler said that Lawrence had stayed with him, and he'd twice served him at dinner. Now, either the guy's a complete liar and just wanted to cash in on the old story, or he did. Yeah. And Lawrence was very secretive. He could easily have come over and looked. Yeah. They say he came to the boundaries of this estate, but didn't intrude any further because the Irish family, what was left of them, disowned him, and that's what upset him even more. They wouldn't acknowledge him because of the illegitimacy thing. And so the whole thing was very sad.
But it doesn't, that picture of him being rather afraid to confront the family doesn't sit with the outward-going type of Lawrence that we're familiar with.
Well, you see, most people base their image of Lawrence on the David Lean film, with Peter O'Toole swanning him out the desert and being frightfully brave and terribly, terribly sensitive and so upset about anything and moved and everything else, But in fact, Lawrence wasn't like that. That's what's so intriguing about him. He was a man with a seemingly multifaceted character. Yeah. He could be terribly shy, and people who knew him well commented on the fact that he could shrink into himself and seem like some grey, boring person. And the other times he could stand up and his blue eyes would absolutely burn with intensity. And one chap said he got so frightened when he was like that he dropped his book because he was so frightened of Lawrence. So he could be really masterful. I mean, you can't lead a bunch of mad Bedouin in the desert and not have a forceful character and abilities to lead.
Yeah. They went into that in the film a bit, where they said that he nearly became an Arab himself in some ways.
Well, in a way he sort of did, but after the war he said, I don't want to have anything to do with the Arabs, I don't want Arab friends, I don't want to go to Arabia. He's had enough of it. Okay. And then, of course, he joined the RAF, not as an officer, of course. He always did the unexpected. That's why people were interested. Most people retire to a Georgian house in the country and write their boring book about their life in the army, and few people go to see them and write about them. But Lawrence didn't. He just said, I'm not going to be an officer, I'm going to just be an ordinary aircraftman. People said, why? What for? He said, because I want to get to ground level. The real reason, I think, partly was that, he said, well, I can't declare myself to be who I really am, namely the son of Sir Thomas Chapman of Killua Castle. No, I'm just nobody. So I'm treated like this, so I'll just be a nobody.
Do you have any idea why he chose to join the RAF under an assumed name? Yeah.
Well, that's what I just told you. Nobody knows, not even like me, people like me who've really looked into the details as much as they can. It's very difficult to know why. I mean, he was an incredibly complex character. I know we're all complex, and I'm sure if someone was prepared to waste time looking into our lives in minute detail, they'd find some pretty interesting things too about us. Yeah. But he was particularly unusual. I mean, he did have. I mean, people like. Cecil Rose, about whom there's a lot of talk recently, and other people said, and John Buckland, who was Lord Tweedsmuir and wrote a lot of novels and became Governor-General of Canada, he said, I'm not very tractable or much of a hero worshipper, but I could have followed Lawrence over the edge of the world. He seemed to represent for me all the lost friends of my youth, and if genius be, in Emerson's phrase, a stellar and undiminishable something whose origin is a mystery and whose essence is indefinable, then he was the only man of genius I have ever known.
Pretty enigmatic. Okay, I think we'll leave it there.
Absolutely.
Eh? Yes, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.